All right, Chargers, welcome to the Charger Leadership Academy. This is technically episode one of the Leadership Academy. We're welcoming Desmond Anderson, class of 2012, from the football program into the studio today. And this is a pretty special guest. He was highly recommended by Foggy, so you know he's good. So Foggy recommended Desmond and made sure that he was our first guest. So we're happy to have him and happy to hear a bit of his story. So, Desmond, you want to give a brief introduction and then maybe get into kind of how you landed at UNH, what the recruiting background was, and kind of your time there as a Charger.
Yeah, definitely. Jonathan, I mean, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me. Humbled to be a part of this and be a part of the first show means a lot of pressure. So hopefully I deliver here. But yeah, Desmond Anderson, class of 2012, UNH football team. We're part of the original KO boys that brought the program back in 2008, and 3 conference championships later, a couple, really, really good teams that I got to be a part of. So just happy to be here. Shout out to Charger Nation.
Throw that humble brag in there. I like it.
We worked hard to accomplish some of the things we did, and my boys would be pissed at me if I didn't say anything about it. But so my story is not a normal story as far as how I got to UNH. I'm originally from Jacksonville, Florida, born and raised. Only played varsity football 1 year in high school and wasn't highly recruited at all. I had a cousin that told me, hey, put a highlight tape together. I'll send it out to some schools. And I ended up at a D3 school in Massachusetts called Becker College. Spent a year there. Coaching staff got laid off and kind of didn't know what was going to happen. And one of our coaches brought like 5 or 6 of us. He knew a guy at New Haven, actually Coach Holmes at the time. And we came to an open house, got to see the school. They were talking about bringing football back, and I felt like this might be a good opportunity. I was an international justice major at the time, and UNH had one of the best CJ programs in the nation. So I sold my parents like, hey, it's not just a football choice. Like, this is school as well. And I was able to get like a transfer scholarship for academics for having a pretty good GPA at the time. So it definitely knocked off some of the cost and made my home at UNH. Coach Rosamando, my first day walking into his office, I was like, hey, Des Anderson, running back. He was like, nah, you play DB now. And I was like, what? Nah, I'm a running back. He's like, no, you're DB now. And I'd like to thank him for that decision because it helped me out a long way.
Turned out pretty good for you, huh?
It worked out well. But yeah, so not the normal traditional story about how I landed at UNH, but kind of my life has been sporadic like that. So now anytime something happens randomly, I think it's the right thing to do, which is pretty funny. But so struggles or kind of what I went through at UNH, it was a very interesting experience for me. I was a young Florida kid in Massachusetts, or started in Massachusetts and in just New England in the Northeast, dealing with the winters was definitely a lot different for me. Trying to getting used and acclimated to wearing heavy jackets, coats, boots, things of that nature. But just the biggest thing I would say is time and balancing sports and academics and also like social life. That was probably the biggest shock for me, or cultural shock and change. I mean, in high school, we had a very regimented schedule with football, but college just takes it to a different level. It's funny, my Facebook memories popped up today, and we had just ended like camp back in like 2009, I think it was. And I posted my schedule. It was like 6 a.m. lift, meetings, film, breakfast, class at 9 and 11, practice from 2 to 5, dinner, then class at 6, and then study hall. I was just thinking like, wow, that legit was my life for like 4.5 years, minus the study hall part because I got out of that pretty soon. But like that was the life of an athlete. And, at the time, you don't really think much of it because that's just what you have to do. But my senior year after football was done, that spring semester, I found myself like not knowing what to do. I was like what do you do as a regular student when you just, leave prior, you don't have practice, you leave class, you're done at class at 1, and you're just free the rest of the day. So that was definitely a new experience for me, something that I had to get used to. I found myself at happy hour a little bit too much maybe sometimes, but no, it was a good time. Definitely enjoyed myself, at UNH, whether it be during the athletics times or afterwards.
Yeah, I think the fact that our student athletes had to go from, our spring student athletes at least had to go from playing their sport and really being in the start of their season this past spring to having that put on hold. Football that you can relate to was getting started on spring practices, putting that on hold. It's a little bit like a forced, retirement of sorts, and they had 5 or 6 months off. We're just finally now going to get back into working out and as a team and as groups. What do you think is, out in the working world, out in the professional world, what's been the biggest struggle that you've faced here, having to be at working from home and kind of dealing with all of this COVID stuff?
God, I mean, it has been a huge transition. I work in recruiting and sales, and we have a very big team environment. So we're on the phone, we're competing, we're tracking numbers, and it's a very interactive culture. So to just kind of take that away, and now you're at home and you're on Zoom calls twice a day, sometimes for an hour or so, trying to bring energy and passion and things like that, it gets hard. Like at first, it's a new experience, and we're like, oh, we get to work from home. This is pretty cool. And then, 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, it was like, all right, like I kind of need to
Old
get back
pretty
into
quick.
the office, and I think we all kind of got through or went to a point where it was like, all right, we really got to make a decision as far as how we're going to make this thing work and be productive. And so one thing we did, one of our managers decided to give us like an hour each day, like, hey, during the work day, like take an hour, whether it's, reading a book, going to work out, going for a run, just kind of self-reflect and self-health, like just focus on yourself and get yourself into a good mental space, because it's easy to go into kind of like dark place when you're by yourself. And I think that was just the biggest transition, was finding a way to self-motivate, but be able to be productive without having someone next to you, without hearing someone else, on the phone or kind of getting you pumped up.
Here we are doing a Zoom call, and I'm about to say, I'm sick of Zoom calls. Like I'd rather just sit in the room with a group of people and have a meeting or have a real conversation. But
Yeah.
it's gonna be the way of the world. I know our students are probably feeling the same way. But the first time that we talked, we kind of talked about how the company that you work for looks to or identifies student athletes, former student athletes, to try and hire. And that's
Yep.
probably a way that you got into that company and have been successful there. What are some of the things that you learned or kind of the skills that you acquired while you were here at UNH that you think are valuable out there in the work world and in your professional life?
Gotcha. Time value, number one. Just being able to operate with a structured schedule. That makes my day a lot easier. We have a set time that we work, but no one really tells you how you should break down your day. And because I was just so used to having structure from like to the point where football, we even had practice was structured time wise. Like, hey, this is what we're doing skill. This is when we're doing skelly. This is when we're doing scrimmages. I break up my day like that. Like, hey, this is when I'm going to send my emails. This is when I'm going to make my phone calls. This is when I'm going to set up my interview times. And it just helps me keep a steady structure throughout the day that makes the day go by faster and makes me a lot more productive. Because if not, you get sidetracked and now you're writing emails or sending emails when you should be interviewing, or you're making phone calls when you're supposed to be doing something else, and it just gets very clustered that way. The other thing, I wrote down some notes, was just being able to face and overcome adversity. I mean, everyone goes through adversity, but I think athletes experience it on a different level, because you put so much, especially at the collegiate level, you put so much time and effort into a sport or into a competition, and it doesn't always go your way, or you don't always play to the best of your ability, and you're constantly being critiqued on it. And so being able to, handle, a loss, handle not performing well, and then bouncing back and redeeming yourself, that's a quality in the workplace that you need it. Like whether you're in sales, whether you're in, the medical field or the business, whatever you're in, there's going to be days that don't go well. There are going to be times where things don't go according to plan, and you kind of got to just take it under the chin and get up and go back to work the next day with the same attitude. The other thing I wrote was being able to give and receive feedback, like take constructive criticism. We get coached hard, and I think that's universal at the collegiate level because the expectations are high, and sports prepared me for that in the workplace. It doesn't bother me, if I'd rather when I'm doing something wrong or I could be doing something better, I want my manager to call me out or at least, bring me to the side. Hey, Des, this is what I need. This is what I expect. Because that helps me perform better. And a lot of managers give you that leeway to say, hey, how do you want to be coached? And I tell them all the time, like, there's only one style I'm used to, and, get after me. Like, yell at me, call me out when I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do and hold me accountable because that's what I'm used to. And most managers receive it well, and it works out. And then the last thing is just being able to ride the emotional roller coaster. They're going to be highs and lows just like in sports. And being able to handle that and never get too high, never get too low. Like sometimes I see, coworkers when they're having a great month, they're riding high, they're flying high, their energy's great. And then it's the exact opposite, when they're not having a good month. And I try to keep it pretty even keel because I know how it goes. And, you're going to have wins, you're going to have losses. You just kind of got to stay the course and keep your head down and grind. To make yourself prosperous.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think in the work world, and as well as in sports, if you kind of have the end goal in mind, you can't get bogged down with every single game or every single play, every single pitch. I think that if you can kind of keep that end goal and know that you're progressing towards it, that's a huge piece of you said there's going to be highs and lows. Now, I got to say, there weren't that many lows for you guys when you were at Chargers. So I know you faced some adversity, but in terms of wins and losses, you didn't face a whole lot.
What's funny is Coach Ross held us to a very high standard, and we respected that. We came in from day one in 2008, and he was like, "Hey, the goal is to win a national championship. We want to compete and win conferences." Because that's the next step on the totem pole. But the goal was always to compete for a national championship. And so every day he held us accountable to it, whether it was in the gym for workouts, whether it was on the practice field, whether we had just won 55 to zip on Saturday, on Sunday, like we were back on the field, running 110s, lifting, and preparing for that goal. And that type of structure is kind of what built the foundation and how I still carry myself now and why I try not to get caught up in the day-to-day. You have good days, you have bad days, but you got to keep the end goals in mind, like you said, because that's really the only way you can obtain them.
So how do you kind of balance the competitive nature that I'm sure is still within you while still being you're in a professional environment, right? You can't be screaming in your coworker's face when you have better sales record than he does. But how do you maintain your competitiveness, but maybe tame it down a little bit for the work?
Yeah. The cool thing about it is the company I work for is they embrace being competitive. That's one of our core values. And so I do get to be myself a little bit. For instance, I'm a recruiter, so I help people find jobs. And when I find someone a great job and they crush the interview and we get them a position, we might jump up and scream or yell a little bit, a couple high fives. We even had a point where we had walkout songs. So when you lock someone up for a job, you got to put on, 20 seconds to 30 seconds of your favorite song. So that's actually been something I haven't had to tame too much. But I'm a little bit more seasoned than some of the recruiters that I work with. And so I take it more as a coaching approach. So I can show my competitive side, but then also kind of give them the compassionate side. Hey, this is why we celebrate the wins, but also if you're not having wins, this is what we got to do in order to get you there. So I kind of find myself being a little bit more of a mentor, just because I'm naturally older than some of the recruiters that I work with. And so that really kind of helps me tame myself because I know I can't get too out of control because they're watching.
So you got into it a little bit, with being a little bit of the seasoned veteran of your group maybe and kind of showing some of the competitiveness and compassion all at once. one thing I like to talk about with our student athletes and student athletes that I work with is how do you consistently develop what your own personal brand is, right? Like we know what Apple's brand is. We know what Starbucks or Dunkin', I guess, out here on the East Coast, we know what Dunkin' Donuts, what their brand is, right? Like when we see it, we recognize it. How would you describe what the Desmond Anderson brand is?
Gotcha. This is one of the questions when I read it. That was the one that made me go, I really got to
You
think
got to
of.
think about it, right?
Yeah, and I really it took me a while to kind of come up with something. But really the one thing that came to mind was like just a man of the people. I always wanted to be a part of the team. Never wanted to be like a star on the team or the best player. I just wanted to be a part of the team and do my part, like do whatever it took to make us successful. You know, whether it was pushing people in the weight room, whether it was, you know, calling friends out on the field or calling teammates out and holding them accountable, and then being able to accept it when I wasn't doing my part or holding my weight, allowing them to hold me accountable. Whether it was off the field, I was pretty active on campus. I was part of student government, member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. I was also a part of BSU, NAACP. And so making myself active as well in that end and being able to show people like, hey, just because you're an athlete doesn't mean you can't make impacts in other places on campus. And I think sometimes that gets lost, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so that was a part of my brand, was just showing that, hey, you know, yes, I'm an athlete and I play ball and I love the sport and I put a lot of time into it and I take pride in it. But, you know, we have a lot to offer outside of sports as well. And so however I can provide service or be of service to anyone in my surroundings, that's how I build my brand. And anybody that knows me or interacts with me knows, like, hey, if you need something, you call Des and he'll get it done. Or if he can't get it done, he's going to get in contact with somebody who can.
That's a pretty strong brand to have, to know that you can call on someone to, you know, be there for you to get it done, whatever you need done. I think it's a really powerful thought, right? Is what is your own personal brand? When other people think about you, what is it that they are thinking of? And really that's, you know, what it boils down to is what's your brand. So I love that answer about, you know, being the guy that's dependable, right? The guy that people can count on to take care of business, and you're not the one who has to have all the glory or the fame and be the star. Although I think you're probably being a little bit humble because I think you were a pretty good player in your day, but
Yeah, used to be.
to not have to be the star and to be the guy who is always there pushing others. That's a great brand to have. So I want to get into kind of one more question for you, and I want you to think, maybe put yourself in the shoes of our incoming freshmen, or even, you know, some of the student athletes who've been here a couple of years. What kind of advice would you give to maybe your 18-year-old self, right? Or maybe your 19-year-old self as you're transferring into New Haven, or even as you've been here a year. Kind of what are some of the things that you know now that you wish you would have had the knowledge of previously?
Gotcha. The wise quote that says, you know, a smart man learns from their mistakes, but a wise man learns from others.
That's right.
We've had
That's right.
countless people come back, former athletes or just speakers, and tell us, hey, college is the best time of your life. Enjoy it, but it's going to fly by. And you hear it, and goes in. Oh, I got to make a move here. I'm in the office side. There we go. It goes in one ear and out the other. And if I really could sit down, there's a couple points I would give to my 18-year-old self at the time, but one of it was just don't be afraid to fail, and not just talking about in sports, but in life. There was, you know, times where I felt like I had more to offer, or, you know, I might have been active in some of these organizations, but I could have took more of a leadership role. But I was afraid of, like, oh, what is it going to look like? Or, you know, what if I don't sound good in front of people? What if I mess up? You know, my boys are going to clown me. And or on the professional side, going after internships and things of that nature. Like, I might not have time for an internship. Or, you know, what if it doesn't work out? Or what if they don't like me? Like, you can't be afraid to fail. You got to be able to take chances and take risks. Another thing I wrote down was you're never too young to make an impact and have a voice. And I feel like kind of with everything going on, I would be remiss to say like it seems like the youth and the younger generation are leading the charge, which is great to see because I put myself in that situation. Like if I was a freshman in college right now, with the mindset that I had at that time, I don't know if I would, be ready to take those steps and to be, a part of the movement. And I wish I could go back and tell my old self, hey, you can make an impact, you can have value, you find, what your niche is or where you're going to be able to be an asset, and you go all in and you dive into it. And then, the last thing is that you're much more than an athlete. I think for my first like 2.5 years at UNH, like I cared about school, but like it was football, and that's all I focused on. And of course, just like anyone else, I wanted to go to the NFL and or be a coach, and that was it, and that's all I thought about. And I sometimes it almost pigeonholed myself into saying like, hey, this is all I have to offer. And it wasn't until meeting and networking with older people, a little bit more mature, or guys that had graduated, some of the guys, my fraternity brothers that were older, that kind of opened my eyes. Like, hey, there's a lot of avenues out here that you can be successful and you can make a lot of money and help your family or whatever you want to do that doesn't involve sports. And so, to all the athletes, like the reality is everyone's not going pro. And that's just how it happens, whether it's through injury, whether it's a skill thing, whether the opportunity just doesn't allow it, or even if you do, your career is going to end at some point, and you're going to have something else. So take advantage of being, more than just an athlete, whether it be academically, whether it be networking. Take advantage of meeting as many people as possible and developing relationships with these people. Get a LinkedIn, get active on social media, take advantage of internship opportunities. I know a couple companies that I've worked with since leaving school. Anytime we have a career fair, I make it a point to get back to UNH and meet and network with as many people as possible, because you never know where that connection is going to go. You never know, when at some point you're going to be applying for a job and you're going to find out that the HR director is a UNH grad. And, you might have an in just based on the fact that you networked and talked to or have a relationship with someone who knows that person. So definitely take advantage of those opportunities because they're very useful down the road.
It's great advice. And speaking of networking, we're showing your Instagram handle as well as your email address here on the screen. So any student athletes out there that are watching, feel free to reach out to Des, and he's already told me that he'd be more than happy to help you guys out with any career-related or just kind of leadership and life type stuff if you relate to him at all here. One of the other things that I thought was really powerful there that you talked about was finding your voice, right? Whether you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, finding your voice and speaking for what you believe, right? So the social justice movement that is taking over our country right now, I think the greatest, you said it perfectly, the best thing I've seen on social media and whatnot is that this is a movement, right? It's not a moment in time. This is a movement, and this is something that is going to hopefully bring real change to our society and the way that we're treated, the laws that are in place and everything else that goes with it. So finding your voice as a student athlete, sometimes it feels like you're just lost or you're one voice out of 500 or 1,000 or however many. What true change can you bring? I think that's kind of a bad way to look at it, right? Think about who you can impact, even if it's just your roommate or just your team or just the athletic department. That's still a huge impact. So so I think that's a great point that you made, and I wanted to bring that back up. So before we let you go, though, I want to have a little fun with you. I want you to think back to your time as a Charger and think about maybe one play or one game that you replay in your mind every once in a while, that sometimes it just flashes back and you wish you could throw the pads back on and relive it. Is there any moment in time as a Charger that you would go back to?
Hands down. There's one in particular. My senior year, we were, I think, 4-0 or 3-0, and we were ranked top 10 in the country. And we were playing William and Mary, who was a D1 AA at the time, and they were ranked number 4 in the country. So no one gave us a shot. We're down in Virginia at their place. The game is, I believe, 10. I think it's 10-3. Late in the fourth quarter, we had a 3rd and about 10 or 3rd and 12. They had a back that was really good. He ended up playing in the NFL. They lined him out wide. And I knew from film, anytime he lined out wide, more than likely he was just running a hitch and they were running a smash concept. And we were playing a 2-flat coverage. I knew it was coming. I seen it, but I still played soft coverage to protect the corner route, even though I had a feeling like he's going to throw the hitch. Quarterback throws the hitch. I break up the pass and get a PBU and we end the drive. But I know for a fact if I would have just trusted my instincts in my film study, I jump that out and catch the ball. I mean, we're at their 20 probably. If I jump and catch the hitch and run it back for a touchdown, more than likely we win that game. That's probably one play that really irks me and gets me all the time because it's a very insignificant play to a lot of people because we got the pass break up and we got off the field. But in my head, I knew I could have made a better play and probably helped win the game for us.
The one that got away.
Oh, man. I think
well,
all the time.
So as you're talking through that, if you're not a football player, you probably are a little bit lost when you start talking about, soft coverage and hitch route and all that stuff. But the moral of the story is watch your film and pay attention in film, right?
Yeah.
And then trust your instincts.
And then trust what you see. That's
right.
That's the biggest thing. Like when you know, you got to just trust your gut and trust your instinct and go after it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, Des, it's been a lot of fun catching up with you. I've really enjoyed over the past year since I've gotten out here, getting to know you, and you're a great ambassador for Charger Athletics. So I appreciate you being the first in line here to represent the Charger Leadership Academy, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Oh, man, thanks. I really appreciate it. And, anytime you need me, let me know, and I'll be here.
All right, man. We will. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one.